Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. History matters. Hey guys, quick video, always quick from History Matters, but I love them because they don't overwhelm me and can understand things on very broad levels, and then I can dive more into them. It's a nice way to learn for me. Why did Europe obey the Monroe Doctrine? Let's see if I have any hypotheses. It's far away. I don't know. Let's go.
Monroe is best known for one.
Every single time today, I've had to restart the video or else it pauses.
President
We're good.
James Monroe is best known for one thing, the Monroe Doctrine. This was where the United States adopted the policy of opposing all New European. The Monroe Doctrine.
The Me Doctrine. Europeans go home and leave the Americas to us. Sincerely yours, James the Doctrine Monroe.
This was where the United States adopted the policy of opposing all new European colonization efforts in the Americas. This was issued in 1823 when the United States wasn't exactly a global power, let alone a nation strong enough to enforce its will in the face of the European powers. Which raises an obvious question. Why did the Europeans generally comply with it? Why didn't they just simply ignore the United States and interfere in the Americas as much as they wanted? So the first 2 decades of the 19th century had seen the start of the Spanish Empire's collapse in South America. Spain did not accept this, and its king, Ferdinand VII, wanted to restore Spanish authority there. At home though, many Spanish citizens wanted him to be less tyrannical and adopt the former Napoleonic liberal constitution. Eventually he did agree to enforce and uphold this constitution, but the issue was that he was lying. As such, civil war and Ferdinand running to the other great powers for help. They were worried about Napoleonic and revolutionary ideals returning, and so they all agreed that France would be allowed to intervene. It did, and Ferdinand was
What?
revolutionary ideals returning.
If they were worried, then why would they want...
And so they all agreed that France would be allowed to intervene. It did, and Ferdinand was restored as an absolute monarch, and his eyes then turned to the Americas. The Americans were much happier dealing with the new nations in Central or South America because they were mostly all republics. And, in this new state of affairs, the US was mostly the top dog. The British approached Monroe and asked if he would...
Dear James, we should work together to keep the Europeans out of the New World. Not us, though. We're cool and can be trusted. Best wishes, Lord Liverpool.
be willing to cooperate. State of affairs, the US was mostly the top dog. The British approached Monroe and asked if he would be willing to cooperate in keeping Spain and France out of the New World. However, the Americans refused to cooperate because of 9 years prior. Instead, Monroe unilaterally declared that European powers could no longer try to crush rebelling colonies or try to expand in the Americas if it threatened American interests. The problem was that the US didn't really have a large enough navy or army to enforce this. So why did Europeans listen? Well, it was mostly because Britain agreed with this policy and so used its navy to enforce a similar one. It wanted the Spanish Empire gone so that it could trade with all these new South American nations which it previously couldn't. As you'll likely know, the doctrine was ignored at times. Britain seized the Falkland Islands in 1833, and when it, alongside France, blockaded Argentina in the 1840s to stop its intervention in the Uruguayan Civil War, the Americans did nothing. Furthermore, the doctrine did nothing about the slow and gradual expansion of Russia into Alaska, and America's lack of action damaged relations with its southern neighbours. But its reasoning was that none of this harmed US interests, and also what could it have done anyway? As the century progressed, US power grew, and with it, its navy. And when the US Civil War erupted, some saw an opportunity. Spain retook this territory, although it wouldn't last, and France notably invaded Mexico. Of course, the Americans weren't happy with this, but they were a bit busy. However, once the war was over, the Americans made it clear that if France didn't make plans to leave soon, the US would make war. And unlike in 1823, the US Navy and Army were more than capable of making life extremely difficult for European militaries. This trend continued, and in 1895, when Britain and Venezuela were arguing over who owned this land, the US declared that it would arbitrate. In a genius move, the Americans then gave the British everything they wanted, meaning that if they accepted the land, it would also mean their acceptance of the Monroe Doctrine's legitimacy. The scope of the doctrine soon grew to preventing any European intervention in the Americas in territory that they didn't already. The scope of the doctrine soon grew to preventing any European intervention in the Americas in territory that they didn't already own. And by the early 20th century, the United States was far too great a power for the Europeans to do anything about it. And so, obey the Monroe Doctrine they did. I hope you enjoyed this episode with a special thanks to my patrons,
few questions.
James Bizanet, Sky Chappelle, Kartuitska, Yuduan Wang, Ryan Hockey, Anthony Beckett's Blue Cardinal, Alex Schwinn, A. Firefly.
So, 2 questions at least that I have. First, I want to go back and read that thing.
unilaterally threatened America. So why did Europe similar one? It wanted, as you're likely, alongside from nothing. Of action.
Okay, I'm just going to give my questions first before I look at that again to find it. So it seems like it was mainly against French and Spanish intervention, and rather than Russian in terms of Alaska and British kind of, saying that, this is a good idea. And so they're like, okay, Britain can stay too. And America just wasn't strong enough to challenge Britain, especially when they brought up when the British went and conquered the Falkland Islands. Why didn't they intervene? Well, one, that is, 8,000 miles away or something like that? 6,000 miles away? And what are you going to do? Take your navy and go challenge the British there? I don't think so. And another thing was where they were okay. Oh, there it is. I believe that owning people is in the natural order of things, and don't believe it should be in the federal government's purview to change said arrangement. Furthermore, I believe that in order to uphold the Founding Fathers' ideals of a more perfect union, it is necessary for the states that engage in the particular institution to secede and create a better one.
When the U.S. Civil War erupted, some sort of
dweeb with Lincoln. And so the Americans were preoccupied with the Civil War and couldn't directly go against Napoleon III's intervention in Mexico. So America always acting as like, oh, we are now the anti-imperialist, like almost major power or sort of major power, medium power in the world that like stay away from here. But is that less about not liking more imperialism and more so about I want to go imperialize or take advantage of these countries? So I don't know if it was as noble as America might have portrayed it to be. And I had another thing I wanted to say. And right here.
Arguing over who owned this land, the US declared that it would arbitrate. In a genius move, the Americans then gave the British everything they wanted, meaning that if they accepted the land, it would also mean their acceptance of the Monroe Doctrine's legitimacy.
But if they accepted the land, isn't that the opposite? The fact that Britain getting control and accepting land of British territory in northern South America would mean that there's
wanted, meaning that if they accepted the land, it would also mean their acceptance of the Monroe Doctrine's legitimacy.
Doesn't that mean the opposite? I don't really understand there. But yeah, I'm not sure if so because Big Daddy Britain was kind of had less of a hold on Central and South America, that Britain actually saw the Monroe Doctrine as something that could help them, because it could mean that they don't have to deal with Spanish territories in the Spanish Empire in the Americas, and now could just deal with more independent states. And so it kind of solidifies my view that when countries say for like moral reasons, anti-imperialistic reasons, they want something to happen, I feel like it really means that's an excuse to just go and do that stuff yourself. Am I getting that wrong?
Yeah. Instead, Monroe unilaterally declared that European powers could no longer try to crush rebelling colonies or try to expand in the Americas if it threatened American.
And also, I'm sure since European countries were dealing with post-Napoleonic War stuff, that it would be more difficult for countries to really go against it, right? I hope I'm understanding a little bit of that. Great video from History Matters, as always. Very short, but sweet, to the point, and interesting. So would appreciate any comments down below, answering any questions I have, guys. You're always great with that in the comments. And hopefully I'll see you guys next time, all right? Bye, guys.